All right, so chapter 19, the key to building confidence. As a teenager growing up in a small town, I thought of myself as a confident person. Then I left that small town and went off to university over 100 miles away. But with much confidence, which I had thought was part of me, stayed at home. I was vulnerable, unsure of myself, not clear on who I needed to be to fit in. Over time, university life became the new normal, and I built up my confidence brick by brick once again. After I graduated, I got a job as a researcher for an addiction service. Feeling confident to meet the demands of the university was no longer enough. I needed to tolerate that vulnerable feeling once again in order to build up confidence in this new arena. The same happened when I began my clinical training, and then after qualification, after the birth of my first child, when I had started my own practice, and again when I started making my work public on social media. With every turn I had ever made, the confidence that once seemed enough suddenly seems inadequate, and vulnerability returns. Confidence is like a home that you build for yourself. When you go somewhere new, you must build a new one. But when we do, we are not starting from scratch. Every time we step into the unknown and try something new, experience that vulnerability, make mistakes, get through them, and then build some confidence. We move on to the next chapter with the evidence that we can get through tough challenges. We bring with us the courage that we need to take that leap of faith again and again. That same leap of faith the trapeze artist must take every time she lets go of one of the bars before grabbing the next one. She is always vulnerable, never completely safe, but each time she tries, she knows that she can meet that risk with the courage needed to make it happen. To build confidence, go where you have none. Confident is not the same as comfortable. One of the biggest misconceptions about being self confident is that it means living fearlessly. The key to building confidence is quite the opposite. It means we are willing to let go of fear, be present as we do the things that matter to us. When we establish some self confidence in something, it feels good. We want to stay there and hold on to it. But if we only go where we feel confident, then confidence is never expanded beyond that. If we only do the things that we know how to do well, fear of the new and unknown tends to grow. Building confidence inevitably demands that we make friends with vulnerability because it is the only way to be without confidence for a while. But the only way confidence can grow is when we are willing to be without it. When we step into fear and sit with the unknown, it is the courage of doing so that builds confidence from the ground up. Courage comes first, confidence comes second. This doesn't mean that we have to dive into the emotional deep end and risk overwhelming ourselves. But it does mean that we recognize how fear helps us to perform at our best and that we need to change our relationship with that fear so that we no longer need to eliminate it before we try. We learn to take fear with us. A relief is a learning model that we can use as a guide for building confidence. Note down what aspects of your life might be in a comfort zone. What tasks feel challenging but manageable, and which things you would put in the panic zone. Every time you step into that stretch zone, you are doing the work of building your confidence by flexing your courage. When you're trying to build self confidence, it is a process of building self acceptance, self compassion, and learning to value vulnerability and fear. It is often a balance act that doesn't always feel easy. Along the way, all the tools in this book can be used as they help to build up your capacity to both lean into effort and tolerance to discomfort, then pull back and replenish. All right, this is the learning model right here. You have the panic zone, stretch zone, comfort zone. All right. Some of the main ingredients for that leap of faith we need for stepping into the stretch zone are recognition that you can improve with effort, willingness to tolerate the discomfort of being vulnerable for a while, the commitment to yourself that you will always have your own back and do the best by yourself whether you succeed or fail. This means embracing self compassion as a life practice and being your own coach, not your worst critic. Understanding how to move through the shame can arise from failure to prevent our tendency to quit on our dreams in an effort to avoid the shame of a setback. Section 3 for more of this. To build confidence, we don't have to live in fear. We have to develop a daily pattern for stepping into fear, sitting with it, and stepping back out, giving ourselves time to recover and replenish, ready for tomorrow. See Section 6 for fear. You don't need to work on your own self-esteem. There's a whole industry built on the concept of self-esteem and the idea that if we just believe in ourselves, we will perform better and improve our relationship, overall happiness in life. Self-esteem generally means being able to evaluate yourself positively and believe in those appraisals. So anyone trying to help you increase your self-esteem might ask you to list what you like about yourself and what your strengths are, and trying to convince you to believe that you will become a success in the world. Sounds like an interview to me. But we have a problem with the concept of success. We link it to the idea of wealth, winning, standing out, and being acknowledged by others. So what do you know if you're winning? So how do you know if you're winning? You compare yourself to others. Maybe you go online and pick any of the 4.6 billion internet users from across the world. With a pool that size, you're guaranteed to find someone who is doing better than you at something. When you do, self-esteem might take a hit because if you are not the winner, you can start to see yourself as a loser instead. What if you stay offline and compare yourself to your friends and family instead? Doing that is not going to nurture healthy relationships. Associating a measure of success to worthiness would inevitably make it difficult to truly connect with the people you're trying to compare yourself to. What happens when you lose your job and your friends get a promotion? A review of the research by a group of psychologists show that high self-esteem is not linked with better relationships or performance, but it does correlate with arrogance, prejudice, and discrimination. They found no significant evidence that trying to boost self-esteem through intervention had any benefits. Self-esteem cannot be relied on when it is contingent on being a success. It is a psychological rent that you can never stop paying. The second you notice signs that you might be less than, you brand yourself as not enough. So you keep running on the hamster wheel of success, driven by a scarcity mindset and the fear of being inadequate. Ditch the positive affirmations. You cannot open a social media platform without coming across an offering of daily affirmations. The idea behind it is that if you say something to yourself enough times, you'll start to believe it and become it. But as it turns out, things aren't quite that simple. For those who already have high self-esteem and believe in themselves, repeating affirmations can have a small benefit of feeling a little better. But some studies have shown that for people with low self-esteem, repeating affirmations and statements that they don't believe, for example, I am strong, I am lovable, or being asked to focus on all the reasons that statement is true, tend to make themselves feel worse. The reason for this is maybe that internal dialogue we all have. If you say out loud to yourself that you are strong and lovable, but you don't believe that you are, then your inner critic will get all worked up, coming up with all the reasons why you're not strong or lovable. This result is an internal battle, and plenty of time to focus on all the narratives that bring you down while you're desperately trying to push them away. So what works instead? Well, the study I previously mentioned found that those with low self-esteem were told that it is okay to experience negative thoughts. Their mood improved. They no longer had to battle with trying to convince themselves of something that they didn't yet believe. Therefore, on the days where they don't feel strong, we don't need to tell ourselves that we are. We can acknowledge that feeling this way sometimes is part of being human. We can respond to it with compassion and encouragement. We can then turn to the things that help us feel confident in our own strength again. by using all these tools at our disposal to move through tough times in line with the person we want to be. So, what works instead? Well, the study I had mentioned previously found that those with low self esteem were told it is okay to experience negative thoughts and their mood improved. They're no longer having a battle with trying to convince themselves of something that they didn't yet believe. Therefore, in the days where they didn't feel strong, we don't need to tell ourselves that we are. We can acknowledge that this feeling is a part of being human. We can respond to it with compassion and encouragement. We can then turn to things that help us feel confident in our own strength again, by using all the tools at our disposal to move through the tough times in line with the person we want to be. That way, when we start to believe something more positive about ourselves, it is to use action to create evidence for it. While affirmations may not be the best strategy for those with low self esteem, words still matter. If mistakes and failures lead to an onslaught of self attack, do not let any of those go unchecked. Professional athletes have professional coaches for a reason. In day to day life, we don't have any of that. So we must be the voice for ourselves. The natural emotional response to failure influences our thought and makes us more vulnerable to self-criticism. So we cannot stop, but we can't always stop it. But we can respond to it with an alternative that serves us better. To build confidence, you have to work on being your own coach instead of your own worst critic. That includes responding to failure in a way that will help you get up, dust yourself off, and get back out there. A professional coach will not bully you with the words or chant affirmations that you wouldn't believe in. They bring honesty, accountability, unconditional encouragement, and support. They are in your corner, whatever the score, with your best interests at heart. Doing that for yourself is not always easy, but it is a life skill that we can improve on with practice. So, toolkit, changing your relationship with fear to build confidence. To begin building confidence in something that makes you feel nervous, you can practice welcoming the sensation of fear and sitting with them without pushing them away. To do this, we don't always have to put ourselves in a situation that causes panic or terror. In fact, that is not advisable. Instead, we can practice by dipping a toe in the water, stepping slightly out of that comfort zone just enough that you can feel the stress response without feeling overwhelmed. Alright, so write down the situation in which you would like to build more confidence. Put the most vulnerable situation at the top. Then list any variations of that situation that you may feel more manageable but still challenging. For example, if I want to build my confidence in social situations, I may put parties at the top of my list as the occasion in which I feel least confident. Slightly easier than that might be a party at which I know everyone. Easier than that might be a small gathering of close friends. Easier than that may be going to a cafe with a trusted friend. Once you have your list, you don't start at the top. You take the scenarios that present a challenge but still feels possible. You then repeat the behaviors often as you can. Once your confidence grows and that situation becomes a comfort zone, you move up to the next thing on the list. The Perfect Nurturer is a tool originally developed by Paul Gilbert and Deborah Lee and used in compassion focused therapy, CFT. It can be a helpful way to turn your focus towards the self-talk you need to when building your confidence. A perfect nurturer is an image of a person that you can return in order to feel safe and nurtured when that is what you need. If you prefer the idea of a coach, use that instead. Create an image in the mind of the perfect nurturer or coach. This could be a real or imagined person, so you can have Mickey Mouse if you wanted to. Imagine that you are sharing with them what you are currently facing, how you feel about it, and what you want to work on. Take some time to imagine in detail how the perfect nurturer or coach might respond, and then write it down. This sets the tone for the words that you can use to start responding to yourself and as you work on building your own confidence and inevitably face vulnerability along the way. Chapter summary. Confidence cannot grow if we are never willing to be without it. To build confidence, go where you have none. Repeat every day and watch your confidence develop. Confidence is situation specific, but what you keep as you move around is a belief that you can tolerate the fear as confidence grows. You do not need to overwhelm yourself with the worst case scenario. Start with small changes. Along the way, be your own coach, not your worst critic. Courage comes before confidence. Alright, so chapter 20, you are not your mistakes. Most self-doubt is linked to the relationship we have with failure. I'm not about to sit here and tell you to just be okay with failure, then everything will be easy. That is not true. Failure is never easy. It stings every time. We all want to be enough. We all want to be acceptable, and failure is a sign that maybe we weren't enough this time. It is not only our relationship with our own failure that needs to change, but also how to respond to other failure of others. You don't have to spend too long on Twitter to develop an overwhelming fear of failure. Say the wrong thing in a tweet, and a collective army of tweeters invade and hound you with verbal abuse, demanding you be pulled down from whatever heights you may have climbed in your lifetime. I have seen this happen to people who make simple mistakes in their use of language and immediately apologize for it. Given that social media is a magnified reflection of who we are as a society, this speaks to me about the intense shame we associate with any form of failure. Those who are highly self-critical are more likely to be critical of others. If we believe that mistakes and shortcomings should be met with humiliation and shame, no matter what the intention, how do we ever begin to be okay with taking risks and making mistakes ourselves? Something that has helped me a lot is understanding that how people respond to my failures does not provide an accurate assessment of my personality and worthiness as a human, but instead indicates how that person relates to failure. Accepting failure is hard in environments where people attack each other for mistakes. No matter how hostile we are towards failure collectively, changing our relationship with failure must begin the switch to an easier, safer option, or we refuse to begin at all. All of those choices are addictive because they bring that blissful sense of relief. Phew! I don't have to face that today. We do that enough times, and it becomes a pattern in our lives that keeps us stuck in a comfort zone that feels like Preckle, with all its lethargy and lack of energy for anything. If the opposite of resisting failure is accepting that it is a part of growth and learning, how do we do that? It is one thing to communicate something intellectually, it is another to feel it and truly believe it in the moment. Saying it is only useful if you buy into it. Belief is everything. So we need to say something that we can buy into. Therefore, it is no use to convince ourselves that it is safe to fail. We cannot guarantee how others will react. There will always be critics. Not everyone is going to help you when you fall. Our only option is to commit wholeheartedly to doing that for ourselves. Start by recognizing that coming back from failure cannot be dependent on others. Using support that is available is always a good idea, but we cannot always count on someone else being there. So committing to ourselves that we will take responsibility to tend to our wounds with compassion and dust ourselves off after a fall is essential if our resilience is not to be dependent on others for doing that for us. Bouncing back from failure. Recognize the sensations in your body and signs in your urges and actions that indicate to you how you are feeling. If you find yourself using all of your favorite numbing activities, hours of TV, alcohol, or social media, the sting of failure drives us back to block. So even if you don't initially notice that feeling, you can notice the blocking behavior. Number 2, get unstuck. Remember the story about Jim Carrey removing the mask. It had less power over him when it was not right in front of his face. We can do this with emotion by seeing it as an experience washing over us, not as who we really are. If you can label the emotion, it enables your mind to take a step back from it. If you can label the pattern of your thoughts, that will do the same thing. The account of what is going on as told by your mind is not a fact, but a theory, opinion, story, or idea. That opinion is tinted with critical voices from your past, present, memories of feeling vulnerable, or having failed. As we get to know the patterns of those critical voices and where they may have come from, we can give that stream of thought a name. There is Helga, giving her 2 cents. Doing this can be powerful at helping us get some distance from those self-attack and giving us more choice over whether we buy into it as factual or see it as a very unhelpful opinion. Number 3, notice the urges to block the painful feelings and keep reminding ourselves that you do not have to act on those urges. When we stop fighting emotion, but instead allow it to wash over us in all its might, it is painful and it is messy, but it also washes past. If we try to push it down and hold it under, it stays there, waiting for the chance to proceed. The opposite of blocking emotions is to be curious about it. Move towards it. Observe the notice the whole experience. All while doing step 4. Soothe your way through and have your own back with the commitment of the best friend that you could ever wish for. Be honest with yourself while also offering unconditional love and support. Wow, that was tough. Hold on. The best kind of friends know that they cannot fix things for us, but they stand strong by our side through the whole thing. Number 5, get learning. Anyone coaching a professional athlete will analyze each performance. They don't always look for what went wrong. They also look at what is working. So when the pain of the setbacks have been calmed, get to work on making that experience useful for you. Don't neglect to notice the things that you did well. Appreciate what worked and what didn't. Be your own coach so that you can learn from the experience and move forward. Number 6, return to what matters. Failure and setbacks hurt every time, but dusting off and getting back out there may still be in line with our values. When the pain of failure is still present, it can be difficult to even consider trying again. Instead, we want to run and hide. Coming back to your values and the reason you're still doing this thing will help you make a decision based on your own interests and the life that you want to have, rather than basing that decision purely on the pain. That being said, I don't want to trivialize just how much we can be overwhelmed with the emotion after failure. So take your time. It is important to work through the experience first and to try again when you are ready. Check out the chapter on the values for more details. But in the heat of the moment, we don't always have the time to whip out our worksheets and double check what is in line with our values. In that moment, simply ask yourself, when I look back at this time, what choices would I be proud of? What actions could I take that I would be grateful I took a year from now? How can I learn from this and keep moving forward? So, chapter summary. Most self-doubt is linked to the relationship we have with failure. How other people respond to your failure does not say anything about your own personality or worthiness. The sting of failure can drive us numb or block emotion. So even if you don't initially notice that feeling, you can notice the blocking behaviors. Be your own coach and turn failure into a learning experience as you keep moving forward in line with what matters most to you. The emotional response to failure can be overwhelming, so take your time.